Dr. Angela. I am Dr. Angela Buckchester. I'm so glad that you are spending your morning with me. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, we want to get you fired up about children's books, but especially books that are uplifting and have a moral message. Yes, that's right. We have to teach our little ones to be their best selves as well. My guest today is author Ed Polansky, and he has written the book Oscar the Osprey, and we are going to find out a little bit more about that. But first, let me tell you more about Ed. He is a native Texan and is a certified public accountant living in San Antonio, Texas. He has been in public practice for over 40 years with Ernst & Young and his own firm, as well as in a regional accounting firm, Weaver and Tidwell, LLP. He is the former chair of a 27,000-member Texas Society of CPAs, an officer in various other professional and community organizations. He is currently a retired partner of Weaver, but continues to consult with individuals and businesses on federal tax and financial planning matters, and sits on the board of a large federal credit union and the local public television stations. During his career, he has written for various technical publications and lectured on professional topics. The Oscar the Osprey books are his initial efforts as an author of a children's book, stemming originally from avid interest in children's literature, going back to when he worked in the children's department of the Corpus Christi, Texas Public Library while in high school and in college. Now, you know what I'm about to say. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Ed. Thank you so much for being on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Well, what a privilege it is, Dr. Angela, and then so nice of you to give me such a wonderful introduction. Makes me feel important.
Well, everyone who comes on my show is important, let me tell you, because I can't wait to share with the listening audience the things that you have done. So before we talk about your book, I do want to ask you a little bit about all that you do. Now, did you know that you wanted to be a certified public accountant? Is being a CPA or in the financial world something you've always wanted to do?
Actually, it has been, and that goes way back to when I was in junior high school, and I got involved in some accelerated math classes and realized that was a kind of something that was very interesting to me. But as we got into higher and higher math, I've found myself wanting something more practical, and that's what kind of led me into my accounting career, which has been with me for a long time. Plus, I had a lot of mentors, so I was helped along the way.
Well, you know, we definitely need folks that want to crunch the numbers. It is, I think, in our best interest to hold on to or know our finances and to know them well and the things that we should and shouldn't be doing. That's very important, especially for our younger people. I think in a world of credit cards and being able to kind of swipe our lives away, they still need to be able to have an understanding of their finances. So that is definitely important. Now, you are now embarking upon the world of literature, being an author. Is that something that you've wanted to do?
Well, as you mentioned, I kind of got the original sort of inspiration when I worked in the public library and worked in the children's section. For some reason, that really kind of appealed to me. But then I started reading those books, and I thought, these, I wasn't really inspired by them. But then when I ran into Dr. Seuss, who wrote all those wonderful books, all very, very moral-based and various levels on which you can read those books, it really inspired me to think about, well, maybe someday when I have to get an inspiration, I would love to give it a shot. And it took 35 years for it to happen. But the inspiration finally came, and I got excited about it. So that's these things you keep in the back of your head that you want to do, and one day it happens.
I love it. I love it. Now, you have chosen to write about a character named Oscar who happens to be an osprey. Now, some people are familiar, some people are not. Can you tell us a little bit more about the animal?
Well, ospreys are very interesting. They're raptors. They're preying animals, but they're beautiful and they look like hawks. They're sometimes called fish hawks because their main diet is fish, and they're pretty. They're all over places, all over the United States. You'll see them in Florida. You'll see them up in the northern part of the United States, and you see them in the West. They're a very common bird. They did go through a period of time which they were threatened. DDT, as a matter of fact, was its problem. But once they stopped that, there's been a resurgence of the animal. They're just beautiful animals, and they're interesting to watch.
It's really funny that you mentioned that, because I don't think that many times we think about the effect of what we do, we as humans, what we do on the environment. Or we think, we just need to protect the wetlands, but we forget about the animals that visit the wetlands. We're thinking about one aspect of it, but we forget about the other aspect. And I'm so glad that they ended up not being on the, extinct list. There are so many animals that are affected. Yeah.
That is so true, and they're so prevalent in so many different areas that you have a chance to see them. They're fascinating animals. And I guess what's very interesting about the way they fish, they fly very high and they come screaming down, and then they catch the fish. And it's just marvelous about watching, because when they fish, when they're flying, they turn the fish into the wind so that there's not drag. So it's kind of interesting.
Wow.
the way they live, and to watch them is just tremendous. So that's what got me interested in them. When finally had an idea for a story, and it was going to be about a bird, that it goes back to one of our experiences in one of our travels with the kids. That the reason I ended up picking the osprey as the character.
I love it. And you're so right. We can learn so much from the animals that are around us. It's like, wow, that's awesome. He just knows to do that. Wow. Look at God do his thing. I love it.
I'm with you on that.
Now, your character, you're of Oscar, the Osprey. Why is he the main character, and what is he trying to teach others? What can you tell us, without giving it all away, of course? But what can you tell us about Oscar?
Well, Oscar is has an affliction. He has a fear of heights, which is a very unusual problem for a bird, and so that's what triggered us. Oh, that's kind of a neat idea. I mean, it'd be different. And writing a story and a moral, the way I think about it, in the way that it's got to be something that is common to humans, because what you're trying to do is pass a message on that will catch a child's interest, and then as they grow older, they can read the same story on a different level. But the whole idea is to be entertaining, but at the same time to be telling, some kind of, giving them a message that will carry them on in life.
Now, if I understand correctly, Oscar the Osprey is a series of books that you have. So my question for you is there a particular danger or challenge that Oscar faces in the first book?
Yes, it's one of the things that's interesting about it is that I set the story in Grand Tetons, which is in the mountains of the west of in the Rockies, and it's in this beautiful lake called Jenny Lake, and the reason he became the character is, and why I picked an osprey, was we were doing a ranger walk around this lake, and then we saw this osprey come flying over with its fish and taking it to its nest. And when later I was talking to my wife about the story I was thinking about writing, then she said, "Why don't you use an osprey? We just came from there." And so the nice thing about it, it's a place. It's a beautiful location, and having it set in a real place, I was hoping it would encourage somebody ultimately go visit this place and see where he's supposed to live. But his problem is, since he can't fly high, he can't migrate over the mountains. So he's left behind to survive, to figure out how he's going to survive these terrible winters. The birds can't really survive in that weather in the middle of the winter. So that's his dilemma. That's his hurdle to overcome.
Wow, I can already feel the listeners, the wheels turning in their heads, saying, "Wow, this is a kid's book. We need to share this with a couple of adults about the winters that come in our lives and what can we do to survive the winters." I love it. I love it. Now, is there? Did you find that it was easy to segue from book 1 into book 2?
Well, actually, you hit upon something there, because the story for the second book came real to me while I was writing the first book, and without giving away the story, it has to do with how he survives, and basically he becomes a hero, but he didn't survive the way everybody thinks he survived, and so he's caught with this dilemma and what I refer to as a conundrum, which I love that word, and the word was used to kind of challenge the language, of a reader. And so he has to deal with this conundrum with fessing up to something that didn't really happen the way everybody thinks it did. So the first story leads into the second story, and then I've got one in my head for a third story, which will come out of the second book. So. And it's about him and his sister. The first one's about him. The second one's about him and his brother. The third one is about him and his sister. So they're all kind of little hurdles that people have to overcome. So that's my objective with this series, is to make it a trilogy. So it takes a while to get there. It's taken me a long time, but I'm getting closer.
But sometimes it takes time. And we have to. We, as the purchaser of the product, we have to learn to be patient. It's like, I'm sure someone's grandmother has shared, if you want a really good cake, you do have to wait. That goodness comes from us being patient. We can't get it too soon, because it won't be, the best that it could be. So I think you're really onto something. And I like how you're saying that book 2, book 1 was just him, book 2 is about he and his brother, and then book 3 would be about he and his sisters. And what a great way that the parent or the adult that's in that child's life, if they have brothers or sisters, they could, or if they have both, what a great series to purchase, because then they could buy the one that's perfect for them. It's like, you and your sister are going through a little something here, read this book. So what a great way to be able to really break it down and make it simple for the children to understand. Well, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, I want to make sure that everyone knows, what to do, and that is, can you remind them what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, the main title is Oscar the Osprey. The first one is called The Bird Who Was Afraid of Heights. And the second book is Oscar the Osprey, the Bird with a Conundrum. They're both available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and that's the best way, I think, to get it, and I would appreciate that. Also, I do have a website for the first book at this point called OscarTheOspreyBook.com, and there's information about that book. The second book is not quite on that one yet, but it's hope to have that, and there's a number of blogs about birds and things like that on that. That would be the best place to find out more.
Gotcha. Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can go to pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Being with Infants by Montessori teacher trainer and world-renowned child specialist Beverly Kovach is finally on DVD and digital download. The long-awaited 3D disc set is essential for any new parent, grandparent, or infant caregiver wanting respectful relationships with infants and their care. Being with Infants is broken down into 20 easy-to-digest video lessons, complete with demonstrations. Everything from diapering, feeding, the proper way of picking up infants, sleep, crying, environment, play, weaning, and much more are covered. Being with Infants is available on DVD and digital download at Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Order today and be sure to follow Being with Infants on Facebook for free bonus content.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. My guest today is Edward Ed Polansky, and he has written the children's book, Oscar the Osprey. And that's right, it is a series. So you not only get to choose from one, but so far you get to choose from two books that will help teach our kids about physical and ethical hurdles in life. We want them to be the best that they could possibly be, right? We want to enlighten, inspire, and empower our little ones as well. And that is definitely what Ed is doing with his series. Now, one thing that I would like to ask is about that. This ethical, this physical, the hurdles, the message that you want to share. What is the moral message that you wanted to convey with your series of Oscar the Osprey books?
Okay, well, everybody faces hurdles in life, and to succeed, one really must overcome those hurdles. And I think to avoid succumbing to maybe the urge to become a victim, and once you become a victim, you know, you're forever held back. But solutions aren't necessary miracles, but they really involve persistence and patience and a passion to help one get through life. So that's kind of the story I'm trying to convey, is that you really have control over your life, and you just kind of decide what happens to yourself. So I'm hoping that message comes across in the stories that I've written.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you trying to tell kids that they have power? Like, so many times I think children think that they are just a bystander, you know, that no one really kind of pays that much attention to them. Is this your way of empowering them?
Yes, I think one of the greatest gifts of understanding that I received when I was growing up was that one decides what's going to happen to them. One must focus really kind of on their direction in life and not let other people decide that for them. You know, that sort of inhibits the growth. You know, life isn't easy, and everybody faces barriers, whether they're emotional or physical, that they have to kind of overcome to succeed in this world. And so much of that comes from within. So you have to understand yourself, and by looking at characters like Oscar and the characters in there, they're learning from within. The mistakes they make, they learn from those, and they grow. But they don't let them stop them. You know, here's a bird that's afraid of heights. How is he going to survive? And he does. And so that's the kind of the neat thing about it.
Mm-hmm. Now, for someone who says, you know, you're piquing my interest, I think I want to get a copy of this book, is there a particular age group that you feel the book really speaks to? Are we talking like our little people? Could it be as early as 4 or 5? Or is it for our older kids, more like 10 or 12? Or all of the above?
Well, you know, it's an all of the above. It's the great thing about, I learned from Dr. Seuss. He wrote a book that would be interesting to a child who can't read, and that somebody reading it to that child would entertain that child. They would love the pictures. They would love the stories. But then when they get a little older and able to read, they could read it, and it would be read on a little higher level, and they would still enjoy it. And then the third thing is that Dr. Seuss stories appeal to adults who will buy the book and read them to their children. So it's all of the above, the language is probably more directed toward maybe third grade, because there are a little harder words like the word conundrum, and I use a number of puns and things like that I hope will kind of be picked up on different levels. But that was the message I learned from Dr. Seuss and other really good authors, is that you write a book for really several levels, depending on the age. But so I'm hoping it appeals to all those levels, depending on the nature of it. And I hope it appeals to the adults, because they're going to buy the book. So
right.
That's the key.
And you're right though, because Dr. Seuss books, you have just as many adults quoting green eggs and ham as I think kids are. We all get something out of the book, be it that we're trying to make a point, or we're just trying to be funny, or we're trying to be relatable. And you're right. Dr. Seuss books, I think, have been in the libraries of most of us, and we're so familiar. But it really opened the door to children liking library time or story time, or wanting to sit down. It's like, I want that Dr. Seuss book. I have to agree with you on that. Now, speaking of words, I love the fact that vocabulary is something that you are being mindful of. I know that for many people, having a vast vocabulary is so important. And in today's society, where we are very informal many times in our speech, you are introducing new words probably to a lot of children. One in particular, the word conundrum. Why did you feel that it was important to use conundrum as opposed to problems or issues or concerns, or any more, a word that we would use more in everyday language?
Well, one of the words I was considering was just the word the dilemma, a bird with a dilemma. And actually, I even thought about in the first book when I had the bird who was afraid of heights to say the bird who had acrophobia, but that just didn't catch. So, it's a kind of a thing you have a feel for. Like the word conundrum is just a neat word. It's a word that deals with with having dilemmas, which we spend our whole life with dilemmas. Everything is a dilemma, whether you get up in the morning or you sleep. You're in a dilemma, and so the issue is well, let's get a really good word that sort of you can wrap it around a much bigger concept. So, and that if I were a kid, I would say, I'm going to look that one up in the dictionary. That's a word I need to understand. It's got a sort of a lilt to it. So I don't know. That's kind of what led me to using that instead of doing.
I think it's a perfect word, because I could see a little kid, when you're doing story time, and I used to be a teacher's assistant for kindergarten, and I could see going down for story time in the library and a child saying, conundrum, what's a conundrum? Or even kind of butchering the word a little bit, a what? And you being able to, in that moment, you could just see them expand and go, oh my goodness, I've got to use that word some kind of way. So I love it. Now, did the message in the second book come from your profession, your life experiences, the things that you have gathered along the way in any way?
Well, actually, the second story does come out of my career, because one of the basic tenets of being a certified public accountant is maintaining your ethics, ethical behavior. And so it was easy for me to get into the dilemma that Oscar had in the second book, where he had to question his ethical behavior and do the right thing. And in the end, he did the right thing, but it's kind of it wasn't a direct route. It's something that he had to deal with, and his brother, who got jealous of him being so popular, was going to take chances that Oscar knew were going to be dangerous. So he had to ultimately fess up to what was the dilemma he had. And, that's a moral value that has driven me for most of my career. So it was an easy, at least, concept to get into. The one that's going to be hard is the third book, because it's about a girl growing up. I didn't raise females, so it's more of a challenge for me to really get into that frame. So I'm working on that right now. But the second book was much easier for me to relate to. So we never raised girls. I understand they're different. That I've learned that from my granddaughter.
Right. Well, it is so funny because we think that that one size fits all, and I have to remind people that that's not necessarily true, because one size fits all in women's is not the same as one size fits all in men's. So we do need to kind of remember that the genders do express themselves differently. They understand things differently just from the way that we interact with each other. But I think that the fact that you are being mindful of that says a lot about you, that you want to make sure that you don't overlook something or that you don't zip past something too quickly, but that they're able to grasp it. I love that. I love that.
Well, I'm consulting with a number of female friends of mine to get input. So I'm seeking the research on that.
And that is so important. That is really and truly so important, so that we don't miss anything. I agree with you there. Now, your transition from the financial world into the literary world, did you find that to be easy while you were writing or during the process, or did you find any difficulty to go back and forth between your two roles or your two expectations?
Well, now that's a really interesting question, and I haven't really thought about that. I do like to write, and over the years I've written some creative things. Nothing ever came of it. So two tricks that have changed, it made it possible for me to do this. One is computers with word processors. I don't think I could ever have written stories on a typewriter that I couldn't make a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I write. I try to lay it all out, and then I come back and edit it. It's easier to work that way. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is the publishing world has changed. In the old days, it was different to get published. Now you publish for demand, so it's not a matter of having to publish 10,000 books. So two things have changed that made it easier for me to do that. But since I took so long in doing this, it was almost like I didn't know what was happening. So, I was so much involved in my other work. But so by the time I got to it, and the inspiration hit, the idea came from it. And I don't know if I could explain really how the idea triggered about this Bird Without Heights, but I could tell you that came from when we were in Colorado, we went to the Royal Gorge. Have you ever been to the Royal Gorge? The Royal Gorge Well, this is a suspension bridge over 1,000-foot drop down to the Arkansas River, and you walk across this bridge, and it shakes and rattles. And that's when my son, who was 13 at the time, said, "Boy, it would really be weird if you were a bird and were afraid of heights," because he had acrophobia, so he was feeling that sense. And that all of us, the trigger came, and then all of a sudden it just. It's sort of like the dam broke and said, okay, I'm going to do that. And, it just takes a moment of inspiration.
Right. Oh, my goodness. I love how, and doing what I do, I love the fact that I get to speak to so many different authors, because the stories, the behind-the-scenes kind of aspect of how a book comes to be is so interesting. The same is true many times for songwriters or for some of the artists that I've spoken to. It's like someone will say something, and it seems like some of the best stories are from kids or young adults that just say something. They're talking about something different, and they say something, and you go, uh-oh, that's an awesome title, or that's going to be a great song. What a great point that he made.
That's the way that's the way it works sometimes.
I love it. And that just proves we need to have conversations with everybody all the time and not think that just because we're an adult that we shouldn't spend time in conversation with the younger folks. You never know how they can inspire us. I love it. Well, Ed, it is almost time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, it's Oscar the Osprey is a series. The first book is The Bird Who Was Afraid of Heights. The second book was Oscar the Osprey, The Bird with a Conundrum. And they're both available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So please, you can get them there. I do have a website on the first book, and it's called OscarTheOspreyBook.com. And there's a lot of information about birds. I was fascinated getting into birds and doing some blogs on that. So it was kind of a fun kind of adventure for me in this process. So I would love for people to check those things out.
All righty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Anne, Camilla, William, and Fred. The four in the Humvee are on a perilous journey, halfway across the country to a tent city near the Mississippi River, a long ways from Boston. Through each bend and turn, they meet some people in need and others who have evil in their souls. Four unlikely heroes in a Humvee on an unlikely trip, the recipe for a captivating story. Grab this book, EMP Casualty by Michael Kravitz.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for our Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. You guys know who I am. I'm Dr. Angela Tester, and my guest today is Ed Polansky. He's written the children's book series, Oscar the Osprey. And I know that I am having a great time talking to him, and I hope that you are as well listening in. Well, Ed, my next question for you is about the illustrations. Now, we tend to forget about the person who makes the pretty pictures when we talk about children's books. So I want to give an opportunity for you to kind of talk about that. How did you find the illustrator? What's the process of that, and how did you convey your vision for what you thought the book should be versus what they understood and how the end product turned out?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it kind of goes back to something I would, if I had my choice of a career, if I knew if I was an illustrator, I would have been a cartoon person, because I think that's the neatest thing in the world to do. And so I was drawn to that sort of approach, but I knew I didn't have any illustration capabilities or the ability to be an artist. So I started seeking out somebody, because this is going to be a little difficult in the sense that how do you take an animal and give it human characteristics, and you don't want it to make it a cartoon. You don't want to make it, just as if it's just regular wildlife. So there's this thing in between that is what I was seeking. And I ran at one of the prominent CPAs in San Antonio, who's since passed. When I talked to him about it, he said, well, you need to talk to my daughter-in-law. Her name was Jean Rosso. So I went and visited with her, and I told her what I was doing, and I gave her a really rough draft of the story, and she immediately found it interesting and was very supportive. And then she took it off and did a bunch of sketches, and then she came back and showed me what she was doing, and I said, that's perfect. That's the combination. And since then, she's just been terrific. One thing she's a marvelous artist, and she's really good into watercolors. And so the covers of the book I have two big watercolors that I have on my wall at home that are the covers for the book. Now, the inside is all pen and ink, and she's real good at sketching. So it's a little bit of a retro book in that it's not of this splashy color, which most children's books are just full of color, which is the way most are done. This one is more left to a little bit of imagination and just black and white. So it's a little bit, of a throwback to some of the books that I remember reading as a kid. So that's kind of, but she's wonderful. I don't have to I just say, here's what I'm doing, and she goes and does terrific work. She's obviously very accomplished artist on her own, but I'm thrilled that she was willing to work with me and that she finds the story worth dealing with. So she was she was probably as much of an inspiration to keep going with the book as anything, was that what she did kind of pulled it together for me.
I love it when teamwork works out, when you're able to find the perfect people to work with. And it really and truly does make your job a little bit easier when you know that you have an awesome person that's handling their end of it.
You're so right about that. We have had no disagreements. I don't tell her what to do. I just say what I'd like, and she goes off and does it. It's unusual, and I understand most publishers nowadays that they use their own illustrators. That you're the author, and then they pick the illustrators. I was fortunate in that I kept control of that. So I like the product. And maybe someday, I'd go back and let her do some more watercolors for these things if I could ever get to that point. But there's just so much time left. You really said something there, because I think that we don't think as much about the time that it takes for them to create their particular portion, the teamwork, that everything is a potential, in that who's going to do this part, who's going to do this part, who's going to do that part. And even though you're the author, you have to think about your product and all of the different aspects of your product. And you want someone who's going to take care of your baby, who's going to feel, as passionate about your product as you do. So that is so true. Now, I would love to ask you some very kind of general questions about your writing process. There are so many people that are an aspiring author, and they need just that little nudge that kind of gives them permission to go on and pursue it. So my question for you is, when you were writing, did you find that there was a particular environment that you needed? Like, did you need that peace and quiet, kind of lock yourself away from everyone? Or did you find that you needed a particular time of day to write? Like, you're a morning person versus an evening person. What was best for you? Well, the hardest part, I think, in writing and for me it was having a good sketch of what I was trying to accomplish. If I really sat down and outlined it before I started writing it, but I didn't always know what was going to happen. And what I found was, as you write, the story sort of writes itself. It tells you the solution. I mean, I didn't know what the solution to Oscar's problem was going to be until I was about 2/3 through the book, and then finally it occurred to me that, okay, here's a possibility for how it can happen. And I think it's Walt Disney that used to talk about something called the plausible impossibility, which was where you see a character running off the end of a cliff, but he doesn't fall until he realizes that the ground is no longer there. And it's impossible, but it's plausible to the mind. Mm-hmm. And so it's the story I was trying to tell when I got through and started sharing with you is, okay, does it have a plausibility? Is it just too, out of sync with reality that it's not going to be acceptable to the reader? And the answer was, well, yeah, it makes sense. It seems like a reasonable solution. and it falls within that plausible impossibility, because everything about the story is obviously impossible. These are birds that are talking, that are, they're just talking to other animals in the forest and things like that. Well, none of that happens in the real world, but it's acceptable because we're basically humanizing these animals. That's always a kind of a scary thing to do, because you might be giving the wrong impression to people. But it's part of the story. It's what it takes to make the message, and you hope it's entertaining enough, and that it's the reality that you're creating seems reasonable, even though it's obviously impossible. So, I think that's you have to think through your work and sort of have a sense of how it fits, and then you splash the story down, and then you go back and fix it, because I don't know how you get there the first time. I mean, nobody's perfect the first time through on what they want to do. And as a matter of fact, I added more characters after I went through it, and then looked at the story as a whole. The other thing is I had really good editing. Editing was very, very helpful in looking at it from a very, kind of impassioned way, and that was very helpful. So you got to, the way I write, I just have to use a lot of input from other people. I have a lot of respect for people's attitudes, so I seek that help. So I don't know if that explains much, but it's the way I work. Now, whether you're an isolated or because when I'm on a computer, my mind pretty much is focused on that, and I'm writing, so a lot of the things outside don't interrupt my process. Some people require dead silence. I like music, and I like, something that's sort of soothing in the background. So that's the way I do it. I don't know how other people do it.
Right. But you said two important things. One at the very end is that's how you do it. And there's someone out there right now that's nodding their head saying, absolutely, that's me as well. Someone else might be saying, no. But it's funny, because there will be just as many people in some cases that say, absolutely, that's exactly what I need. Or they're doing that kind of nudge the other person saying, see, honey, I told you that's how you do it. It's like, finally, I have someone else who's on my side. So that's
I have a feeling you've been there before.
I have to give a shout out to my family when I was writing my workbooks, that they were very accommodating to me, because I was a little bit of both. Sometimes I wanted to write in the morning. Sometimes I wanted to write at the end of the day. Sometimes I needed it really, really quiet. But then there were some days where it was like, I want to know that you guys are here, that you're walking about the house and all of that. So go on and do your day-to-day. Sometimes I needed my earbuds in, because I wanted to just be submersed in whatever music I needed that day, be it that it was opera or jazz or country. I needed that. But you also touched on a really important name there, and you mentioned Disney. Walt Disney was such a visionary, and I think that many times people forget how much of a visionary he actually was. So that's a great person. If someone wants to Google somebody, Google Walt Disney and see that he was definitely ahead of his time. I remember, I was watching some entertainment show, and they were in one of the locations for Disneyland or Disney World, and the person said, do you think, no, it's a shame that Walt didn't get a chance to see this. And the person responding said, but we are able to see it because he did see it. And I went, exactly. You have to be able to see it in order to create it for others to see it. I love it. Well, Ed, thank you so much for sharing your vision with us, for sharing your process and all that you have done in order to make your children's series come to life for our kids to be able to read. If you could please, one last time, can you remind everyone, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in touch with you?
Well, the books are under the Oscar the Osprey series. The first book is called Oscar the Osprey, the Bird Who Was Afraid of Heights. The second one is Oscar the Osprey, the Bird with a Conundrum. They're both available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And also there's information about the first one and a lot of blogs about birds on OscarTheOsprey.com. So if you want more, those were places to get it. And I certainly appreciate the chance to say those things.
Yes. Thank you again for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in and spending time with me today. I hope that you have been enlightened, inspired, and empowered. Well, as always, may you continue to receive God's grace and mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.